show 664 of This Week in WordPress and Tech, and I'm Spencer Foreman, your guest host from America, not overseas. And this week we're going to discuss several interesting stories, including but not limited to German court fines for GDPR. Is that justified? Plus, we're just around the corner from WordPress 6.0. We've got a lot of other great topics, and we've got an amazing guest. Andrew Shafer, a well-known social media expert in the WordPress space, has been gracious enough to join us, and we put him in the hot seat right in the bottom. So hopefully we'll be able to hear from him on a couple of our big topics. Otherwise, we've got a great guest panel, as always, a full house here today. And if everybody would like to, starting with Neal, I'd like everybody to introduce yourself. Neal, would you please share a little bit about yourself with our audience?
Hey, everybody. My name is Neal Schaffer. I am a digital marketing consultant, author, speaker. I'm best known. I've written 2 books in my early days on LinkedIn. So I'm well known in the LinkedIn communities. But after that, I wrote a book on social media marketing strategy called Maximize Your Social. A book on influencer marketing called The Age of Influence. And my next book is going to hopefully become the definitive digital marketing playbook. So I'm sort of a social media marketer turned digital marketer, hoping to breed some fresh new insight into the space.
Awesome. And we've got at least one topic today that we're definitely going to hear from you about. Let's go on to Stephanie. Stephanie, introduce yourself to the audience, please.
What's up, everybody? I'm Stephanie Hudson. I'm here in Charlotte, North Carolina, repping Focus WP, my company that does white label outsourcing. And I would love it if you would come hang out with us in our Facebook group, Focus on Your Biz, B-I-Z.
And we've got Sally. Sally.
Hi, I'm Sally Getch, the WP fangirl, organizer of the East Bay WordPress meetup, and a big fan of all things Gutenberg.
Me too. And now we've got Heather as well. Heather, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I am Heather Wild-Renzi, the CTO of The Difference Consulting, currently hanging out around 50 miles offshore of the California coast and scouting new locations for my next conference. Because I'm also the founder of Antarcticon.
Wishing I was there as well. And next we have Andrew. Andrew, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Andrew Carr, and I'm the owner of 23 WordPress plugins specifically for Divi theme, and also the co-founder of Bertha.ai.
And you're working today from an undisclosed closet?
I'm working from a new house that I've moved into on Monday, and it's chaos because nothing's happening.
The bunker is no more.
That's right. The bunker is gone with all the guitars and stuff. And then finally, we have the original and still founder and host of the show, WP-Tonic, Jonathan.
Hi there, crowd. It's Jonathan from WP-Tonic, where we help people build membership and education experiences on WordPress. Back over to you, Spence.
Fantastic. Well, before we jump into the first topic, we've got to pay for the show. So we're going to go for our break now, and we'll be right back. Welcome back, folks. I just want to point out that you can get an amazing offer for our main sponsor, Costos, as well as many of our other sponsors. If you'd like to do so, please jump on over to WP-Tonic.com. And the URL you want to go to is recommendations, WP-Tonic.com/recommendations, to find out about Costos as well as the other sponsors of today's show. Now, let's jump into our first story. This is entitled, German Court Fines Website Owner for Violating the GDPR by Using Google-Hosted Fonts. And for this one, I'm actually going to choose Heather, because I would say you are a resident in the SaaS space and all that goes along with that. What did you have to think about this particular topic?
I think this case is actually going to cause a lot more waves than ripples than a lot of people realize right now. Basically, the crux of this is that somebody took to court Google for putting Google fonts on their site, saying that it's a privacy violation. And Spencer, you know more about this kind of thing than, than I do. But basically, because an IP address was forwarded to Google from just one file, like the Google fonts, then that was a privacy violation. And because the judge ruled in the plaintiff's favor, this now sets precedent in the EU, starting in Germany. That means it is a GDPR violation from just Google Fonts, which can then be used against anything. So it could potentially, like I said, waves, not ripples, take down all of Google Analytics and the like. But it opens the door for Google to go down a lot.
I mean, this seems to me the devil's in the details. First of all, I'm not in any way an expert of European law, especially with GDPR, but I know enough, and from my legal experience in the US. First thing is that the judge was from a regional court in Munich, and they actually not only gave injunctive relief, but 100 euros of damages. But the basis for this whole case is what's interesting, because it was not an active violation. In other words, it was sort of like, we didn't realize it, but it did this thing, but we're going to be punished anyway. And if you imagine the scope of everybody who is using Google Fonts, if this is in any way, shape, or form upheld, it is going to be wild, wild west in the European Union for people going out for bounties, right? What did you think about this one, Andrew, since you're actively involved over on that side of the pond?
I think if an IP address can personally identify you, which we all know it can, you can go right down to the latitude and longitude of the person using that particular computer. I think it's right that we should have been warned. We should know about this, but I don't think the responsibility should be held by the website owner. I think it's Google that need to fix this, and they need to fix it quickly. Because it's not,
it's £250,000, right?
Yeah, it's a big deal. I mean, every single Divi theme user uses Google Fonts because
it's 6 months in prison.
Yeah, crazy.
Well, I'm saying, like, you're now using Divi, and it's got Google Fonts, and you're over there in somewhere off the coast of Belgium, and next thing you know, your little teacup shop, somebody comes knocking and says, we need 250,000 euros, or we're going to spend 6 months vacation over in Sing Sing or something, right?
Well, it's 250,000 euros if you don't respond to the request to fix it. And in this case, you can self-host your Google Fonts, but part of the issue that's being discussed is like, it collects your IP address. Yeah, well, every freaking browser identifies your IP address every time you visit a website. I mean, it was kind of like, there was an issue where somebody was complaining about something that was on a client site. And they were complaining about something embedded from the embed code provided by the news site. Right. And then so we removed the embed, and then, they're still complaining that they don't want the links there. I'm like, does anyone understand how the internet works? Right. You are complaining that video is still available on ABC's website.
I mean, the thing is, Neal, I'd like to know Neal's opinion about this, because isn't this partially an overreach of whoever made this decision by a small court? But really, this is an educational problem, a social media problem. It's like letting people understand that the GDPR does not magically cure everything that these legislators or other politicians think is wrong with the internet. It seems like this is something that could go the other direction, that does more harm to GDPR than good, because it puts a lot of light on how ridiculous the fines and penalties are and who is responsible versus the benefit, right? What do you think?
Yeah, I think you just got to take a step back and look at the big picture, because the concept of GDPR, give consumers, privacy rights over their data, it is something that's needed, right? But yeah, if you don't understand the technology behind it, and you want to go after big companies, and maybe this judge wants to make a name for him or herself, there has to be an oversight to the process, and those people have to be knowledgeable enough. I mean, the people who wrote the legislation must have been knowledgeable enough, but it's really the application. It gets a little silly when, yes, the internet is based on, open source software is based on. I mean, it's all based on this whole collaborative community of interlinking websites. And to not recognize that as part of whatever guidelines you create would be really stupid. So I think it's real ticky-tacky. It's not focusing on the bigger issues. And yeah, it's sort of ridiculous. But
the point is that, like, even just a $100 euro fine for showing that, like, oh wait, the IP address is being sent. Like, I mean, Google could be doing this on purpose just to test the waters, and they might be like, okay, slap on the wrist. But if they don't change it, like, which they won't, because they can't.
Well, Google won't change it. The website owner could opt to self-host the fonts and therefore not collect that information.
It kind of puts a big problem on the website owner, right? Because at the end of the day, most people, I would gather, don't know the difference between Google-hosted fonts or remote fonts. And then furthermore, the penalty is not really being directed at the person who's culpable, because really it's the software author or it's Google who's doing the thing that's allegedly violating. But more than not is there's no proportionality to this. I mean, in the law, legislative things always come out that are crazy, right? Like, you know, you can't walk your dog on Tuesdays and it's $100. Well, they have to go through this process of being ridiculous, get enough attention, and then the legislature, the legislative people have to back down, right? Stephanie,
I see it as an opportunity for people like Stephanie, who runs a maintenance and management business, and people panicking, and she's saying, yeah, we'll do this for a deal, you know, we'll upload fonts for,
like, yeah, give us your thoughts, because I think that's where the rubber's going to hit the road for the WordPress people. Is so, like, when the GDPR notice came out, even if it didn't apply in any way to America, every single conversation with the client started with, what about the GDPR? I have to put this gigantic sticker at the bottom. What's your experience with this kind of stuff, Stephanie? What do you think?
My new policy is all Arial all the time. That's it. It's problem solved. Right?
Well, but we need to bring back the blink tag. Like, we just need to just have everything.
For sure. For sure. We got to make it pop. You know, we got to make it pop.
This site will definitely steal your data, make your life miserable, and you don't want to be here. But by the way, we've got a special offer just for you.
Yeah. I mean, this is such a... It's one element of so many things that are going wrong with the web right now. It's a little bit like we have jumped the shark with trying to combat all of the nefarious acts that are going on. It's now making it for just a borderline unusable space. How many things do you have to close to read a website at this point? Like, it's getting out of control.
Most of them are ads.
Obnoxious.
Oh.
Well, ads and your cookie pop up and your privacy thing and your this and your that, and then you scroll down and then it's the CTA, and then it's like it's becoming like we're trying to solve problems, but we're not serving the end users and the visitors to the websites. So this is like, there's so many things wrong with all of this. Yeah, we shouldn't be giving people's IP addresses because they're reading something in a font. Like, it's ridiculous that happens. And again, it's, you know, Google's not going to pay for it. Google's not even going to change. And then it's going to be the company owners that are going to get fined. And then who are they going to sue? Me. They're going to come sue me, or they're going to sue their web developer, who's then going to come after me because I'm managing their site or whatever it is. You know, like, it's a really problematic, you know, it's like, oh, one IP address was sent to Google Fonts. Yeah, that sounds like such a tiny little sentence. And it's like, it's just a massive problem.
It's a Getty's imaging problem, isn't it? Right? Getty Images with their army of lawyers. All right, so I'm going to finalize this one by bringing it up to Jonathan, who runs an agency, has a lot of contractors, has a lot of clients that are well-to-do enough, but not necessarily experienced in the what and the why. And we've had these conversations between you and I a long time about what to say, how to say it. I feel that there's certainly a benefit in the internet as well as in the real world. If all of these warnings could be combined into one giant button, all jokes aside, that just pops up one window, and like any other contract, nobody reads it, but just says, sure, fine. That's enough. But in the end, isn't it true that really doesn't help the customer anyway? And it certainly doesn't help the sales process, because the client who's coming to buy just either ignores it because they're bored or used to it, or they get into it and they get such a cold sweat that they run away. What do you think about that?
Well, privacy matters, but in the age of modern security services, you know, especially America, the CIA and the spaghetti soup of different spy agencies, and especially the UK, which is one of the biggest worldwide spy network in the world. the idea that you got any privacy is delusionary anyway. So
it is a bit of a joke, right?
But it still does bother me because it is pure 1984. You know, you got any intelligence, you would be concerned.
But just having a phone or a browser on, right? I mean, we joke about this on the show, but if any of us say anything, it's going to be picked up by your multiple girlfriends in the room, Alexa and Siri.
Well, Snowden, you know, everything we say on Zoom, everything we say on a podcast, anything, it's all Snowden. It's all been observed. It's all going into some database. It's been stored in Utah in one of the enormous data houses in Utah. It's out there. It's been monitored. It just depends who's monitoring it, really, doesn't it?
All right, so let's tie in story number 2. And I want to start with Neal on this one, because now that we're talking about, I was reading another story that ties into this about Microsoft, who was the original first and most notable violator back in the 90s, who really got taken to task in public for their antitrust stuff. But now they're
haven't paid the fine, by the way.
Well, there goes the lesson, right? So even then, they're a behemoth now because of new management, new tactics, but they really stand outside of the fray of the big ones like Apple and Facebook. But this next story is about how Apple has served Facebook up a poison pill, and now Facebook is starting to see some kind of public fallout from this. And it could be something to do with the other stuff like the metaverse and Mark Zuckerberg's personal preferences and so forth. Neal, what's your spin on story number 2? Facebook lost daily users for the first time ever last quarter.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of competition out there, isn't there? And we knew that Facebook was an aging platform, and I think this just really shows how much it is. Obviously, it's funny. I have a 17-year-old daughter today, and we were talking about TikTok, and did COVID cause it to accelerate its growth? Probably, but the fact of the matter is, it's definitely crossed that chasm. And it's huge. And I don't know if you remember, like a month ago, they said on a given month, there was more, was it web traffic to TikTok than to YouTube? It was a pretty fascinating statistic just of how big and how the amount of time that people are spending there is incredible.
Even YouTube Shorts, by the way, I want to recommend that because that's like a TikTok clone in YouTube. And I even find myself now flooded with shorts and I'm just sitting there mindlessly browsing through them like TikTok, right?
YouTube's trying. And then you got obviously Instagram Reels. Everyone's trying to keep up with them, right? But that's, you got TikTok for the very young. You have Instagram for the very young and the millennial, and then you have Facebook, which a lot of people think is very toxic. At some point when your technology hits a certain level of maturity, there's no new people that are going to adopt it except younger people that are coming of age to be able to use social media. And they're obviously not going to Facebook. So I think it was only a matter of time. I think their growth had already pretty much flattened out. So it's not surprising at some point that's going to happen.
Yeah. Sally, what's your spin on this? Because you and I share conversations in this group all the time about we basically remember the good old days of this and the good old days of that. And I do find myself really amazed that certain things are attractive to my kids and to younger people who are, let's say, around those friends. What's your spin on whether this spells the beginning of the end for Facebook, or is this just a symptom of their recent bad news or other stuff going on?
Well, we've seen a number of tech companies that did really well during the pandemic suffer from losses in stock value lately. And some of it was just, like Zoom, for instance, their growth was one of those hockey stick curves once everybody was at home. But then you get to a point where, everybody already has it. And then you cannot expect the growth to continue that rapidly. With all of the users that Facebook has, there were not enough humans left to keep it growing at that rate. And the thing is, no young person wants to be hanging out where their parents are. If your parents are on Facebook, you're going to want to go somewhere else to be with your friends.
Yeah, can I say something? I think the key headline is totally correct. But when you look into the story, that quarter, Facebook profit went up by 36%. to say that it's a money cow, it's printing freaking money, is a slight understatement.
But you know, this is the shift. So I'm going to ask Heather this question because I saw an anecdote about the notoriety of Facebook and all the things they're trying to do to either remedy it or stick their thumb in people's eye. It's undeniable that certain kids of certain ages are not going to use the stuff that their parents use, but also Facebook in general. When I speak to older people, my father's age in their late 70s, 80s, they don't want to. So it's like there's this generational thing of certain users. But isn't it true also that in Silicon Valley that you've got a scenario where people kind of think of being associated with Facebook as a dirty word now, or a dirty reputational thing, versus a newer, energetic, untarnished company? Do you think that has anything to do, or is it irrelevant?
Sort of.
Yeah, sorry.
Are you?
Okay. I mean, yeah, sort of, but it's like, I mean, you could say the same thing about Microsoft. Like, people for a while were like, oh, I don't want to work for Microsoft, it's old and stodgy. And yet, like, as I've said before, there's so many people that are just like hanging around Redmond just to like get an interview there. So I think there's always going to be people that are like, I need to work at Facebook because it's a huge company. And as far as like kids not wanting to be on Facebook, of course they don't, because like it's like 12 to like those tweens, Facebook's not for them. However, I know a lot of kids in college, like the college age ones, that are like happy to finally gain the thing that they're like their older brothers, their parents, their whatever on, because now they feel like they're adults. So
do you think it's bell-bottom genes of software platforms that it took long enough to go down to like 12-year-olds till it became cool again, like looking through their parents' closet and going, oh, this thing none of my friends are on, I want to go here now where my, you know, I'm reusing my mom's genes.
There's a thing about, I mean, it may be a little shuggy, like that kind of thing, like where they're like, oh, I think it's something that I want to aspire to have because, but they know it's like at 24 you're over TikTok, like, and you need to go to something else, and like that's when you start like dipping the waters into LinkedIn, and you're like, well, that's not an everyday thing, and then you're like, okay, well, what about Instagram? And then you go on Instagram and everything's fake and it's just pictures. And you're like, okay, well, I need to actually connect with things. But around like, I mean, colleges still require you to have a Facebook account, and they require you to have a class board, like a Blackboard account and all this stuff. So like kids are coming onto Facebook because their colleges require them to have Facebook groups, and they require them to do all that stuff. So like, as far as
like a LinkedIn, right? I mean, you almost need to have it, right, as a prerequisite.
Yeah, and then once they're on it, they're on it. So,
right. Stephanie or Andrew or Jonathan, dealer's choice on this. Do you feel that the move to Meta for Facebook, and then we're going to move on to story number 3, do you feel that this is going to be something that causes a great churning event, or something that's going to get people interested where they might not be excited right now?
I think nobody cares. We don't care because we're geeks, and we care about like, is Web3, what is Web3? Is it a thing? Like we're all invested in what's coming with the tech. Most people are like, okay, there was some big announcement, it's so meta, whatever, you know, like it made the news and now it's gone. Like literally, if you are just a user on Facebook, nothing has changed. You know, it just is like a business decision. Like they're just renaming the.
There's like a different icon on my Instagram app.
Right, but do you think it's like PayPal? Like when PayPal tried to bring its 1990s product into the 2000s, and they just slapped an interface on the front of the same old, you know, Clubhouse, and you saw the cracks and everything.
Don't start talking about Clubhouse now. That's a whole nother.
Well, Clubhouse, but right, but metaphorically, like different interface, same crap. Is that
with Meta, think about where where he wants it to go, you know, into the virtual world, and us all wandering around. And I think Meta or Facebook is going to turn into the sacrificial lamb within a few years, because everybody will be in Meta, and that's going to be the transition. Because we've got Facebook glasses, you'll be able to have, you know, Oculus that won't look like Oculus. You'll be able to have the the heads-up displays, and we will all be enacting. Probably not in my lifetime because I smoke too much, but you know, we'll all be interacting in a virtual world, and I think that he is being quite visionary about it, because he's saying this is where we're going, because computer power is getting bigger and better, cheaper, whatever. So, you know, give it a few years, everyone's going to be in Meta and wandering around the street and with their friend. I'm going to be wandering around with you, Spence, in Chicago. I'll be in London. I'll be giving you a guided tour of the Tower of London, and that's my certainty. I'm so certain about that, and I hope I live long enough for it to happen. But that's what's going to happen.
I mean, the real question is whether it'll be a generic or a standardized interface. So, for example, I could send over Jonathan some Oculus Rift headsets for a couple $100 now. Previously, you had to sign up with Facebook. Now they've given you an option to buy out of that, which was interesting. But the point is, whomever makes the interfaces, or even if we get a little implant from Elon Musk, once we get to that point, it seems pretty obvious, right, Jonathan, that you're going to be unfortunately joining the Borg and, you know, becoming one with the rest of us, right? You're first in line.
Well, you know my feelings towards Mark. I think he's truly is an obnoxious individual.
You know your feelings towards Mark. Don't worry.
Yeah, you know.
I saw the letter you mailed him this year.
But, you know, he's upset a lot of people in Silicon Valley. You know, he's got sharp elbows, but maybe you need sharp elbows. But he's got a notorious reputation in a part of the world that has a lot of notorious reputations. He's got one of the biggest notorious reputations. I think that's the best way of putting it. Wow. This about virtual reality play, it's a bit like the, you know, the phone, where before Apple created and Steve Jobs created the iPhone, it's software linked with hardware. You know, you're not going to get the software until the hardware gets to a certain level, and you can't. The hardware can't do anything without the software, so it's kind of
it's a land grab, chicken and the egg, right? Whoever builds the best hardware can get more interest in the software, but then it's a question: are they going to try a walled garden play? Open.
I don't think I don't think Facebook, because they're not, they've obtained no success in hardware. I think the only, you know, that's got the money, you know, they've got so much money, is Apple. You know, there are rumors Apple is the end of this year or the next year are going to have some hardware in this area.
They're a sleeping giant, aren't they? Considering what's at stake, right?
Well, and they're costing Facebook $10 billion a year, according to the CEO of Facebook yesterday. You know, so they're kind of stealing the march on them because they've got so much money, and because they've closed down iOS to Facebook advertising and stuff like that. They're just costing Facebook.
I mean, and it's not a stretch. And I want to move on to story 3, but it's not a stretch to imagine, since everybody has an iPhone device, a good majority, something that interacts with the phone much like the EarPods did, but that gives you this interface, would take a lot of the junk out of the headset, put it in the phone, and they're just doing Bluetooth. And I mean, it just seems
we're all carrying computers around with us everywhere we go.
I'm going to challenge you on the good majority of people that have got iPhones. They haven't. It's the majority have got Android phones.
Well, Android too, but you know.
Yeah, same thing really in this particular thing. But here,
but I think
I have a prediction. In 30 years, to 2050, the eBay of the metaverse is going to be selling Oculus Rift headphones at a premium, like we see original Nintendo boxes and the brick cell phones that are like a novelty item that were kind of dorky, and then they kind of swing back around to, like, you know, because they got so upgraded so quickly, they were so dorky, and then they come back to like vintage cool again, you know, that kind of thing. That's what's going to happen. That it's going to just keep going. The big, you know, the glasses, I'm shocked haven't taken off yet, but I guess they're getting better. And you know, those kind of things, it's going to just keep getting smaller and more efficient and better. And then those big clunky things are going to be just the vintage versions of these things.
StarTech cell phone is
Yeah,
Okay.
but I think just to finish off, I think the biggest thing is you just pointed out the two biggest players, Android and iPhone. Facebook don't have any hardware, and for this to really work, you need, you need you need to be in the hardware area, and Google, through their third parties, through Android, and then Apple directly. Facebook just don't have that, so I don't.
I would make a prediction on that, and then we're going to move to the next story because before our break, I want to get in. I'm going to make a prediction that's a wild one, but some end user site could be OnlyFans, Pornhub, something like that is going to be the driver of the hardware because they've got the user base that immediately will pay premium amounts for the hardware. And if they do a partnership deal with the tech manufacturer, I don't know if Apple would do it, that's like cart before the horse, problem solved, because immediately who's going to buy it versus like Oculus Rift is a great thing, but it's a toy for many people that's unnecessary. Those
dirty money's going to pay for it.
They have a lot of users in that space. Okay, I want to get in the third story, looking ahead to WordPress 6.0, the early roadmap, and our guest Neal has been patiently here since we have so many opinions today. I want to let you start this one as well because we just jumped through 5.9. It brought a lot of changes, but it's sort of like going to IKEA and smelling that they're making the cinnamon buns, but they're not ready yet, and thinking like, how long is it going to take? What's going to be coming out of here? So what's your spin on this roadmap and this particular story, Neal?
Hey, you know what? I actually wasn't done with Meta. I know we're going to move on. I just want to say one thing that a lot of people don't talk about. I look at when a company is going to do something, where's the money? And I think that the money's in NFTs. And I think that if they can be successful with the metaverse, they're going to control a huge economy of NFTs. I've already had big brands reach out to me for influencer marketing campaigns regarding their NFTs. So, and now we can attach an NFT to anything or anyone in this metaverse. So that's what I see. I know you focus on like the hardware and software, but I think that's a missing angle that we should all look at as well. And I think that's what Facebook's big play is.
Julian Lennon, I'm a big fan of, and he had a rough time with getting his dad's assets, but he recently made what I think was a good move, and he took a lot of the stuff that he ultimately had to buy or got, and he did NFTs by like dictating or reading or making videos of it. And that's actually a use case that makes sense compared to the lady farting into a jar and stuff like that. I mean,
right. So sorry to take us another angle there.
It's a good angle to go actually, because there is so much now with crypto and NFTs and all that going on. It's gonna either run the world or ruin the world. It's a bit iffy.
Or both. Now. It's not like those things are mutually exclusive.
Exactly.
There's room for all of them, right? All right. So what's your spin on the WordPress? Because I think all of us are wondering how soon and what's going to happen. And are we going to make the jump to Lightspeed with like the full site editing, or is this just going to be another incremental baby step?
Yeah, it's funny. I am like the layman here. You're all the WordPress experts. And even something like Gutenberg has taken many years for people to actually use. And if people don't use it, the development of plugins and the community, what have you, it takes time as well. It just takes time for people to change. So, and I think, with WordPress, that is the case. They, every new update, there are major updates. I think Gutenberg was the most major update of the last few years. I don't see 6.0 being the major update of the scale of Gutenberg. That's just my own layman's opinion. I'd love to hear what everyone thinks.
Well, let's jump over to Stephanie on this one. Stephanie, I mean, because you run these, you recently had a big event and you deal with a lot of people in the space who are the end users as professionals and otherwise. What's your spin on whether this is going to be really consequential, or is it going to be just sort of another little step?
Listen, don't forget, we have image filters coming, you guys.
Right.
That's huge.
Huge.
This is huge. I thought full site editing should have been called 6.0. I thought that was a big thing. So I'm a little confused as to what we're actually talking about. And then that sort of launched, and it was like kind of like nothing.
Well, 5.9 was sort of like we take a half a step towards the thing we're talking about. The biggest issue.
Well, they took more than half a step, but the idea with 6.0 is to
templating and so forth,
make it more, make it more usable. It's a big change, but unless you switch over to a full site editing theme, you're not going to notice anything very dramatic happening.
Right. I mean, that's the thing right now. There was originally the 2022, and now they say a few other themes have come up. But the big issue with this, to spin this, and then I'm going to take it over to Andrew on this, because this gets into Divi and your experience with the marketplace, is that there still has to be a resolution, a unified thing about how are we going to build this thing? Because we can't have this random meatball hanging out there that builds 5,000 specially made custom themes versus one bootstrap-like canvas that I've been ranting about, and that everybody can build onto that. And I always bug you because your expertise in Divi, but it applies to Elementor, it applies to the core editors, and it applies to people making themes. There's a big investment. Can't we all get along and just make an agreement to build one thing in one space?
I don't think we can. It's the Android phone, iPhone situation, plugs going in, USB ports. It's that kind of argument, and you've got so many people that want to take advantage of a very competitive but very large space. So they're going to build their themes. They're going to say, this is the best way you can go. And this is where Divi isn't a plugin per se. It is a plugin, but it's a theme. So it's the largest, biggest selling theme in the WordPress ecosphere, right? There's proof of that. The numbers are there. I don't think it applies to Elementor anymore, WordPress, basically, because Elementor have gone the hosting route, $89 a year for one site, including Elementor Pro. I think loads of agencies are going to use that. I know that hosting companies are not happy about that move by Elementor. I've spoken to a few of them over the last couple of weeks. So I don't think it applies to Elementor, but there will always be the opportunity, and I agree with you, Spence. We should have just a standard theme, and we'd be able to build our own stuff going along using patterns, using blocks. But then even now, there are over 150 block plugins, one of which I own, right? So, and then Gutenberg AI is going to come into its own as well. But because there are opportunities out there, somebody doesn't have a block for that, somebody doesn't have a block for that. The core blocks in Gutenberg are basic, right? Because they don't allow us to do the things that we want to do.
And redundant.
Well, Poodlepress just came up with what I called, I chatted with him a few months ago about Divi Layout Injector. Lo and behold, James has come up with Block Layout Injector. Brilliant, really good, right? So you can inject any block into any page dynamically using the Poodlepress block injector. Brilliant. So you're still going to have all of these people wanting to make either their mark by being a contributor and doing free blocks, and you're going to make the people like Syad, me, Lemma with LearnDash. You're going to have LearnDash.
Yeah, Brian Gardner with the Frost project. I thought was
because he's giving it away because he can afford to give it away because it's part of WP Engine. So there's.
But isn't this a problem of somebody in the WordPress echelon not first of all, either taking control from automatic top down, but maybe that's not possible because it's really like a bunch of people in a car trying to decide at lunch where to go for everybody to eat. And you ever watch 30 Rock when they have the thing at lunch, who's going to get to choose? Nobody could choose anything because we see this in the post status group. I mean, you can say one topic and there'll be 900 different opinions. And so nothing gets done when there's not top-down decision-making. So my question is, does it make sense for somebody of consequence, a company of consequence, to say, hey, we're going to be the first, like Elon Musk, we're going to open source the Tesla stuff and invite everybody else who makes the stuff to just agree on the standard, right? Would that make sense? Because then
it makes 100% sense, but it's not going to happen. It's suck it up, baby. It's the nature of open source. WordPress is open source. It's GPL.
It's the nature of everything. But yeah, I mean, how many form plugins do we have? How many? This is been the path of everything in WordPress. It's not necessarily bad. But, you know, I saw somebody recently share one of those XKCD comics about, you know, somebody saying, this is ridiculous. We have like 8 different standards for this. We need one that combines them. You know, 2 weeks later, we have 9 different standards because, you know.
Yeah, but you're always going to get people screaming, but it's freedom. It's free. WordPress is about freedom. You know, it's always said it's about freedom. I'm free to build my own plugin, my own block, my own pattern, my own theme.
And you should be. You know, I do think, you know, there are certain things that should be improved about the core blocks, and I think the core team gets ideas as a result of like stuff that goes into some of the third-party blocks. And I think the third-party blocks are wasting their time if the blocks they create are basically duplicates of the core blocks, and that, you know, the interest is going to be in the blocks that do what core blocks don't, the blocks that do things that not every website necessarily needs, because not every website is going to need product blocks or calendar blocks or learning management blocks, just as they don't need the functions. And so those things go into the plugins.
It's going to end up looking like the drawer we all have in our kitchen under the microwave that has all those miscellaneous
the drawer of doom.
Miscellaneous tools.
The drawer of doom.
It's like,
yeah, my drawer of miscellaneous
calendaring widgets
elsewhere.
I think we need to go for our break.
Right. Okay. So sorry, I've been watching the time, and so since we had a lively discussion, let's go for our break, and we'll be right back, folks. Okay, and we're back. Listen, we actually used up a lot of our time, depending on whether our leader here would like us to do one more story, or should we go into recommendations? What do you think, Jonathan?
I think we've got time to do one more story, and then Neil will nod off and want to go. So
why don't we try story number 5, which is making the web better with blocks, because it kind of ties into what we're doing. And this is from Joel Spolsky, who is old school.
Joel on software.
Joel on software is old school back in the day. I want to turn this over to Heather if you had a peek at this one, because Joel kind of ties it together. You know, what was your thoughts on his discussion of blocks and using blocks? Because it seems like he's coming at it from an angle that's not common, right? He's looking at how it should work, like we're just talking about as a system.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this actually works really well for people that are just coming into the idea of blocks. I mean, it's his idea is saying, like, whether you're using React, whether you're using WordPress, no matter what you're doing, when you're designing something, you should be thinking of your website as kind of like a wireframe, like a user diagram. And then it should all be interchangeable. So if you've got a user flow where you're thinking, okay, well, how should somebody be coming into a site? Then it should be, you can just block it out. And then, I mean, he's just thinking of a website as like a wireframe. Like a low,
he's
low
calling it this block protocol, right? So what he's saying is essentially for the users who can't see this, there's an image, and it's essentially saying, like a wireframe, that when you make stuff, blocks, this is the way you should do it so that everything follows the same pattern. And think of like Lego blocks, right? They only work because they're all the same shape. They all have the same size. They all have the same measurements. It wouldn't be good if they were made out of wood, or they had square connectors and they had little different angles. They have to be standardized, because I think his lesson or takeaway is nobody's doing it. We're going to be the ones to figure this out. And like I referred to Bootstrap, by providing that for the universe to use, we can all start to get along a little better, right? With whatever you build.
Yeah, the specific thing that is interesting to me in this is that he's not just talking about WordPress. I don't know if that's been clear to the listeners in what we're saying, but he's saying like specifically a block protocol, so that whether you are building a page in WordPress or Medium or Notion or wherever you're building your content, that it's all the same. And I think this is kind of a funny topic right after the one we just had, where we're like, we can't even standardize it on one platform, and this guy wants it standardized for the world.
Well, I mean, look, we have like the 3C, trying to set up standards for the internet. And, you know, we can't get the tiny handful of big browser companies to always be in line on that. It's not a bad idea. I think it's a brilliant freaking idea. But to have, you know, blocks detached from their environment, I do think it's just going to be, you know, logistically very difficult for the same reason.
Back in 2006, where we all had the promise that you can log in with Facebook or Google and everything will be available, but then we learned very quickly no data will go out.
I just think it's really. I've just been listening to the panel. It's unfortunate in ways because Gutenberg's got so much promise because linked to this story, and for there's been costs about burnout around plugin and theme producers because they've had all to deal with all this ongoing change, plus they've got to make sure their plugins and themes work with all these different page builders. It's resulted in a lot of burnout, a lot of additional cost, time. But Gutenberg is a great possibility. But I'm leaning now to what Spencer's saying. If we had a real good starter framework, it's a kind of template theme framework, and people could bolt different stuff upon that, it would be probably a better position than.
It's called Wix. It's called Wix. It's called Shopify. It's called Webflow. It's called whatever the other ones are.
Anything that can dictate the standard. That's what it's saying, right?
It's there already, you know, and we're complaining about it because it's not in WordPress. So, you know, it's called Elementor. You know, it's got a standardization.
Yeah, what I'm probably saying is the great leader and the people from Automatic want to look at Wix and maybe that's others,
right? I mean, so I'm going to let Neal have the last word on this, and then I want to go to our recommendations. But I just want to throw.
Can we, if Neal's up to it, can we? I'd love to hear Neal's thoughts about Google. So if we could go to story 4 and
absolutely. I just want to say one comment, and actually this ties in with what we just talked about, the WordPress roadmap. What is WordPress's vision? What are the problems that I have that they're trying to solve? Sorry, Gutenberg solves some of the problems, but Elementor saves a lot of problems. And guess what? If WordPress can't solve the problem, I will go to a Wix or a Squarespace. Recently, my WordPress developer said, hey, you should look at Webflow. You don't have to deal with all this WordPress nonsense.
It's a controlled space.
Once again, keep your eye on the ball and understand what the pain points we have. If you're a WordPress theme developer, or plugin developer, your pain points are very different than the small business owner, right? But that's what I'd like to see them resolve. Gutenberg did that. I'd like to see more of things that relate to speed, ease of use, you know, SEO. To me, you know, Elementor, Yoast, the Gutenberg theme they use, I love Bloxy. Those are my heroes, not WordPress. And WordPress should be the ultimate hero. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right. So I want to throw in too that one of the things that I talked about this week for the WP Minute thing was this topic of, like, a lot of the developers that we represent or are involved with are feeling a little nostalgic, but like Jonathan said, the burnout. They don't want to get into building React stuff. So I think a lot of the first tier of people that got us where we are today are sort of saying, time to go. And not in a negative way like WordPress sucks, but rather I know I'm going to need a whole level of skills and support that I didn't need in the PHP stack. And that's a deciding factor for them. All right, so let's just pop over real quick to story number 4, which is Google just had another record quarter. Again, kind of the antithesis of the numbers count, but focusing on the money count. Neal, what's your spin on this one? It says because or in spite of everything going on, which is probably relevant.
It's funny, the way that the public views Google versus Facebook, like the emotions when you hear those names, it's very different. But I will say it's really interesting because I do think that Google, when I think of like when you create a YouTube video, and I think my reading of the article was that YouTube ads especially had a huge increase in revenue. And when I do think in a funny way, Google seems to be a little bit more responsible. Like, for instance, is this video meant for children? I mean, they will ask you. They're doing a lot more. I was asked by a reporter about like people that are following stupid trends on TikTok and like killing themselves or doing harmful things, right? I think YouTube actually has been a little bit better, although there have been issues in the past. I actually think they've been a little bit better. So, you know, Google.
Yeah, I think that Tide Pod challenge predates TikTok.
Well, that's true. Yeah, obviously. But I do think that Google, you know, like I said, I'm a social media marketer converted digital marketer. And I just think everybody, you know, they're on the hamster wheel of content creation for social media when search engines are right there, Google being number one. I still think that there is huge potential for growth in Google ads just because they're dominant place in the marketplace. In YouTube ads, we now have Google Web Stories and YouTube Shorts. They're trying to find new ways. I mean, look at what Mr. Beast did, the economy of YouTube, the amount of advertising revenue that Google is able to give to a Mr. Beast so he can create something that competes with Squid Games, right?
I mean, that guy freaks me out every day. For those who don't know Mr. Beast,
I have never heard of Mr. Beast.
We have to tell who
that's just as well.
Oh, man, okay.
Mr. Beast is a YouTube creator, kind of like a guy PewDiePie, but now exponential. He has a team of people, but he has, I think I looked, 186 million subscribers. But when he posts a video, maybe it's 86, but when he posts a video, his videos are like he's giving away hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars of things in a scheme. And then he gets like 190 million views of his videos. And I don't know what that revenue equates to, Neal. You probably know, but I imagine it's an 8 to 9 figure business for this kid.
Yeah, the whole idea is, hey, I am making so much advertising revenue. I know, and this is the way YouTubers work. They make so much advertising revenue. They also have like, you know, brand partnership deals. But at his level, it's pure like ads. He makes so much money and it's so predictable based on views. They says, hey, I know that if I make X videos a week, I'm going to get this much views. I'm going to get this much more revenue. Now I'm going to start to invest in making better videos to get even more views because there's ROI attached to it. It's actually really, really intelligent.
Yeah, I don't know if the panel's like me. I don't watch cable television. I haven't watched cable television for years. I
haven't watched television since I was
I only
13.
watch YouTube and listen to podcasts. I don't even listen to the radio.
It's the shakeout. It's the shakeout of the internet that's continuing for decades. It's all the time we grew up watching TV. It's all, you know, it's in TikTok, it's in YouTube. These are huge economies that aren't even mature yet in my mind.
I mean, just 180 million views. Like think about just comparing TV, right? Like my sister's in TV and media, and a great show might get 5 million visitors to a show on ABC. And this guy posts 6 videos a day in 5 channels, and he's getting 180 million people and immediately getting paid. I mean, and nobody knows him. Like nobody over 22 knows who he is unless you're in the social media space. My kid, my 10-year-old, 11-year-old keep trying to tell me to look at this stuff. I can't stand what he does, but it's just, that's why we don't get it, right? Like the entire economy. I was wondering, Sally might have had a funny laugh on this, but with regard to the Google revenue, it's like, I'm wondering if the 65 billion is as a result of taking all the free Google spaces and making us pay $6 per
I just want to ask Neal this before we go to our recommendations and wrap it up. Neal, I think the other factor is, isn't it, this is a monopoly now. This is the biggest monopoly in the world. This has become such a, well, funny enough, a beast. Surely it's got to be broken up. You can't, if this continues at the growth that, you know, it's pure monopoly, isn't it?
Well, they do have Alpha, Beta, and Beta. Alphabet and Beta, they do have 2 companies. But yes, it is a monopoly. I think it's one of those things where who is harmed by it? I suppose it's those companies that don't appear organically in search engine results, and those companies have to pay a lot of money. But I do think Google is the case of something that is very utilitarian, that for us giving up our privacy and letting them be a monopoly, we are getting tremendous benefit from it. Think of life without Gmail, without Google Maps, without Android. I mean, we can go on and on and on. So it's an interesting balance, right? But yes, at some point, if you're going to go after Facebook, Microsoft, Apple, and they have tried to go after Google, but now that they're reaching this whole level, yeah, at some point, I just don't know if a broken up Google is going to be a solution to the world's problems.
It's just passing it down.
Yeah, well, it's America, so they're not going to nationalize
the
it.
GDPR thing comes into play too. It's like you break it up, and then what? You're going to have 6 different companies that are going to manage it. It doesn't even.
AT&T.
Right, exactly.
All right. I mean, how are you going to break up Google? What is Google? It's not Google. Is the search engine? Is ads? Is Gmail? Is it's helping businesses present themselves on Google business listings. It is a helpful thing, right? It helps us make money. It helps our customers make money. Yes, it can be. You can see it as a monopoly, but I don't understand the mentality behind we need to break it up because it's making so much money and it's got so much control. It is up to us as individual users, businesses, creators, etc., whether or not we want to use that service to our benefit and to our customers' benefits. Because if I sell chocolates and I'm top of Google, I'm giving my customers the best chocolates, and it's thanks to Google, right? So thank you, Google. Thank you, Facebook. Thank you, YouTube. I don't want to break you up. I'm completely against breaking you up because I adore you and I love you and I will love you forever. But yeah, clean up your act, right? Clean up your privacy. Do everything that you can to do stuff, because I'm giving you money, and part of that money I want, like I give to drug companies when I get my prescriptions, I want them to clean up their act and make sure that what they're giving me is clean Nurofen, right? So I don't want to be poisoned by the stuff they're giving me. So that's my view.
It's going to be Wild West. The technology might have more to do with it than anything else, because if there's an alternative way to consume, that moves us over to something else, and then everybody stays at the old lemonade stand. I think we've had a great show, but it's our recommendations. I want to start with Neal. Neal, please share with us how or what you think is your recommendation, if you have one, if you knew you were supposed to bring one today. If not, would love for you to share about your site or where people can find you.
Well, no, I didn't. Well, I think you might have mentioned the email. Sorry. But since we're talking WordPress, I just want to give kudos to individual WordPress developers or WordPress plugins that I think should be known by more people that aren't. So there's a plugin that I love called Link. This is a paid plugin. I'm not going to drop an affiliate link or anything, but it's called Link Whisper. And what Link Whisper does is it basically goes through your site and it gives you suggestions of where you should create internal links. So internal linking is something in the SEO world that we know about. But if you have a blog like mine that has 450 different posts, being able to strategically do internal linking is not easy unless you're really good at Excel. So it's a really well thought out tool that I've been using since its early days. It's now maybe 2-3 years old. I've seen it just get better and better and better, and using more AI and better performance. It's what you want in a plugin that fills this immediate need. I think it's like $69 a year or something like that. But if you understand the importance of SEO and the importance of internal linking and you're a WordPress user and you manage SEO or do that on behalf of your clients, I highly recommend this plugin. And it immediately shows you how many orphan posts you have, where your external link, internal versus external link numbers, what domains your external links are going to, et cetera, et cetera. So there's also a lot of power in its analytics, even if you don't use it to do the actual internal linking.
Awesome. So we put that in the show. And while we're at it, why don't you let the audience know where they can find you? Because we're going to consolidate this together.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I will tell
you. The Link Whisper was awesome, but I'm going to try to make it so you can have a chance to share where people can find you.
I am the real Neal Schaffer, Neal, Schaffer. That's in social media, YouTube, podcast, and then my website.
And Neal, I just want to say, Neal, I consider Neal one of the true experts on digital marketing. He's been on one of my other shows, and my God, Neal, you're a beast of social media, to say the least.
Mr. Beast.
No,
I appreciate that. Thank you, my friend.
Right.
Thank you very much for that. So let's go around the horn. Stephanie, what's your recommendation of the week?
I am recommending Monster Contracts for those who are doing web projects. This is a very valuable service, especially to me this week in particular. It's a contract that you buy for $1.99, and then there's a nominal annual fee and they give you updated contracts as laws and things change. Wow. I was terminated by a client for the first time this week, and I didn't shed a single tear, if you
don't
know
look
what I'm
any worse
saying.
for wear.
Yeah, but they've paid their 50% deposit. We're 1 week away from launching the site, and they want us to hand everything over to them. But we've got an ironclad contract that says they actually owe us in full because we've already begun development. So
now they need monster attorneys to go with that to go enforce it.
Monster contracts. Yeah,
that's just your step one, but it is good to have.
I know. So for somebody like you, Spencer, that has all the legal connections and experience, you don't need it, but it's so useful for all of us creatives who want to just put our head in the sand when it comes to the legal stuff.
It is a good idea. It is a good idea indeed. Sally, what's your recommendation of the week?
My recommendation is 28 Days of Black History. As our panel, one might notice, is a little bit white. And if you're like me and you were raised, as white privileged girl in a very white town, there is a whole lot of American history about which you know nothing. And this will help repair that absence.
Heather, by the way, thank you, by the way, for that, Sally. Heather's recommendation was for a wearable air purifier to remove pollen called Air Vita. That'll be in the show notes. Andrew, what are you recommending this week?
I just want to say that we know about American Black history because we were educated in the UK, but that's my point on that.
Don't get us started.
Yes, but do you know about UK Black history?
Oh, no, don't worry. I've been educated in the UK. I'm pretty cool with what I know about America. The recommendation this week is Jamie Marsden himself. He's and a good wishes to him, and I think the panel will wish him good wishes. He's going under a little heart procedure today, and he'll be okay. He'll come out of it tomorrow. But he left a little tweet saying, "Right, I'm going in. I'll see you on the other side," and then corrected the tweet and said, maybe seeing you on the other side wasn't the right thing to say. So, but I'm recommending him as a fantastic person in the community, real good contributor. And his plugin, particularly that I've mentioned already, is the block layout injector. It's going to change your life if you want to put banners up, footers, dynamic stuff in post content. If you're using Gutenberg, it's one of the best plugins out there. So poodlepress.com. block layout injector, and that's what you want. And good wishes to Jamie as well.
Fantastic. And Jonathan, do you have something for us this week?
Yeah, it's a video from, he's come on the show hopefully this month. He might be coming back. That's from Paul from WP-Tonic. And it was animator wireframe template kits. He does a video about it. It's from Animator. It looks really cool. Go and have a look at the video.
Fantastic. And I actually have an odd one because I like to play with various video editors. It's called Video, and the link in there, so it's veed.io, but it was a very clever online editor, and it worked actually on mobile as well. I love Bloom, and I love all the other plugins that I use on Mac or PC, but this was just an alternative way. And one of the clever features was you can do your on-screen recording and do like Sal, the tutorial instructor does, where you can mark up, all of the things while you're doing it live. And I thought that was an interesting feature, especially if I was doing a tutorial. And the recording capability seems to be pretty brisk. So that's one to check out as well. I think this has been a terrific show. I want to thank Jonathan for allowing me to come in and stand in his
good job, Spence.
Thank you.
And energy up all hour.
Right.
I want to say that next week, if I ever do it again, I will do it with a full British accent. But at least in the meantime, I want to thank Neal Schaffer for joining us. And hopefully it wasn't too painful for us to beat up on you. But you actually had, I think, the best answers of all on most of these topics.
Remember I had that all aerial one?
Right. Yeah.
Well, I tell you, I hope Neal will join us again because hopefully you've enjoyed it, Neal. But your insights have been fantastic.
A lot of times on the show, you get caught in a corner and you're kind of in the crossfire. But today, the show topics were just in the right wheelhouse. But I hope everybody will visit nealschaffer.com. I hope everyone else who is listening or viewing will join us next week for another great selection of stories and an interesting panel of WordPress experts and professionals. Until then, thanks, folks. Bye.
Bye.
See ya.
See you later.